I'm super excited. We're here inside Anta's Studios, and I've got Jay Golden, the OG storytelling coach. And we're here and Bobby's producing, and we're here for the special reason is Jay's on the OC leaderboard. Jay's piece he wrote, and I love it because I took that selfie because I'm in it too. And I love it because Peter Brennan at OCBJ said, hey, we've got to tell what's happening with this group of people that are purposeful. And so I have to start from the beginning because I think I was the original person you coached here, and I want to just take people back and to discover why it's working. So Jay, just welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you, Charles. It's so good to be here in the Anta studio. You know, I grew up here, right here in Irvine, and I did not return to work with anybody until I was connected with you decades later through someone in the Pacific Northwest. And we first met, started lining up, I learned about your journey. And admittedly, you still are, but you were very much a live wire. You had a lot of things and a lot of ideas coming through that were a handful to begin.
I'm going to pause you right there because because I was knowing to pause you because I had all this passion and I didn't know how to be heard inside my company or out. And so the way I found you, I didn't find you initially. I went to find what fulfills me at the Purpose Lab, at Imperative Purpose Lab in Seattle. And I met a pod member that went through this 4-day course with me named Tara. Yeah. And that was your friend. And what happened there is I found what fulfills me. Tara was the one who said, Charles, stop trying to manage people. Just go out and speak. You are fulfilled by awakening passion in people for what fulfills them. So just be a people awakener. And then I said, okay, I need help on my speeches. She says, no, you don't need a speech coach. You don't need that kind of help. You need a storytelling coach. And that's when I had this mental image of like an old mule riding 49er with a gold tooth and a whiskey jug.
Hey, what's going on, Charles?
That's what I imagined. And so, but she said, no, he's this guy. He lives in Silicon Valley. And I didn't know what to think. But she said, he's the world's most formidable storytelling coach for telling your story. And I thought, I got to call this guy. And that's what changed everything. But I came on strong.
You came on strong. You had a lot. There were 8 different things that you talked about in that first session. I remember it very distinctly. And I was thinking, gosh, that's a lot. These are a lot of things going on.
You almost didn't coach me, didn't you? Isn't that true?
It's very rare that I find somebody that's so powerful that I actually consider not working with them. And I have to be super honest. I didn't know I didn't know if I could help you. That was what I was really considering. And we talked it through. I let you know that.
Well, you actually said, because you are a storyteller, you love mental imagery. And you said, Charles, coaching you is like trying to coach a wild horse thrashing down a mountainside. I think something to that effect.
But your purpose is so clear and your heart is so open that we did another session. And in time, what I realized is that those 8 things that you were talking about, putting roofs on Habitat for Humanity, putting roofs on Ronald McDonald House, considering how to support the houseless in Orange County, considering how to support the kids, like all these things, they were all the same things. And I realized that you were incredibly ready to find the clarity of how to speak to people.
I remember, I knew it was worth the investment. The first speech I gave after I'd hired you. And I told a story that I'd told before, and it's a story that you know now, and everyone that knows me know. It's the story of when I gave away that first roof that I didn't plan on giving, but I showed up at the house, and the woman answered the door, and I'd smelled mold, and I saw the frown on her face, and I wanted to leave, but instead I was pulled through that house and into the room by a little girl, into her room, and I knew it was a room because she pointed to the My Little Pony poster on the wall. But that's when I looked down and I saw the moldy mattress that she slept on. And when I told that story to Cal State Fullerton Leadership Awards, we were being honored. Everybody in the room, there were 500 people, they all paused, and I watched them. They could smell the mold. And I'm shaking right now because that was the first time in my life I was ever heard by everyone in the room. And it mattered because everybody in the room had something that was similar in their life where they showed up and they did something. And I felt the power of the unity of story, especially when there's purpose. And I live in this purpose world. Everybody I know, everybody that I'm comfortable with, the people that are not toxic to me, I'm sorry if that offends anybody, but the people that are safe to be with, they're people that live their lives and their careers in such a way that they give that thing that they do best away. And that's when it really started to work. And that's when I was heard inside my company. And people knew why we gave away the roofs, and they were proud to give them away. And it started to work outside the company because people got that. People that show up at a company with character, of purpose, where people want to do good, likely the quality is going to be a little better. And we say that at Answers Roofing, we say every nail matters. And all these expressions, they came since I've hired you.
And that's the thing, is that you have had such raw power and such an open heart and clear purpose, but how the words support you and how you orient yourself to where you're going when all the emotions are flying, and how to create direction, that became the richness of our work. And I'll tell you that story, I retell that story all the time. I mean, all the time. I retold it this past week in a presentation. And the act of immersing the audience in both the pain, from a brain science perspective, it's the cortisol, it's the stress. Oh my gosh, what do you do? Because the tension of that moment, to me, that I still relive when I tell it, is that you had to help, but you couldn't help. You had to help, but you couldn't help. And Carl Jung, the great psychologist and philosopher, said it's between that place, the tension of opposites, the impossibility of I have to help, but I can't help. That's where something new comes up. And that is what happened in that moment, because you had to help, but you couldn't help. And so you had to create something new. And you reached out to people that weren't always, you call them your friends, but the way you told me was these were people you were also kind of in competition with, but you called out to all of them and said, if I show up, will you show up? And you said the same thing about, getting help with the materials, and you created a coalition. It was through the tension of opposites that power emerged. And part of the reason I love that story to this day, and look, I can get tired of stories. Like if I retell a story, I can get tired of stories. But the reason I love that story is not just the moldy mattress moment, the potency of that pain, which is very real. And you're right, it draws people in, but it's the tension of opposites that you said, I have to do something. You were compelled to a greater self. You called out a coalition of different people. And it's from that coalition of different people, not always friends, but people that wanted to help, that still exists 30 years from then, that still exists today, 30 years later. And that's what I think is so powerful about that story, because that's what you're doing now in like 50 different ways. And that's what's happening in Orange County, which makes me proud to come back here and be helpful.
You did a workshop here 3 years ago. And again, all these stories were drug out after you asked the question, or you got my team asking the question. But we were there. I was sitting with Susan DeGrassi. We were broken up. And the question was something like, I think I maybe said that, but we'll break that down. Well, what happened? And this is like, I'm a roofing contractor. Who knew that my stories could be so compelling?
Yeah.
And no matter what you do, but by asking that question, I'm going to try to tell it a little quicker, but I was given this property manager, maybe just to shut me up, but she said she gave me a leak that no one can solve. And I went to solve it. And it was an 8-story condo with a leak on the 6th floor that no one had solved in 30 years. And I remember the frustration, but also the opportunity. And there it is again, that like, how can I solve this? But oh my God, I mean, it was an opportunity like I was on a Broadway play and the understudy and the lead actor went down, and now all of a sudden, this is my moment. I've got to perform. So I got a bosun chair. I didn't have a ladder to go that high. I got a bosun's chair. And if you think about that, what that is, that's that boat. That's that guy on a sailboat. You see the sailor over the side painting or washing. I mean, it's crazy that I was doing that. I was doing that, dangling over the 6. I literally looked like a wind chime. And I had all my Makita drill tethered to me. I had all these tethers from the roof, and I had all these pieces of siding. I'd pulled away 7 pieces of siding. I had 1 tether left. And I was sitting there, I was so frustrated. Like, what was I thinking making that claim? I was feeling so low. And I cut that last piece of siding, and I looked down and I saw the tiniest little speck of white. Like, what is that? I picked that out with my finger. It was rotten. The paper started coming up. This old drywall came off, and underneath it, I saw an ancient square-headed nail going through a copper pipe. In that moment, it wasn't even from roofing, but I knew I'd solved the leak that no one else can solve. And contrary to that feeling I had so low 1 minute before, I was suddenly as high as I was 6 stories up. I was feeling so high, and I knew that I've got this. I can build a company solving leaks for families, keeping them safe and dry. And that was a powerful moment. Thank you, Jay, for pulling out those stories, because I think that's what's happened here in Orange County. You know, for a long time, instead of speaking about roofing, I was talking about storytelling, and I would bring you with me. And in fact, I tried to get you to go with me to speak at one of the biggest things in roofing, Best of Success. I'll be speaking there in December. But I tried to get you to go.
I didn't fit in the suitcase.
Yeah, you say, you know what? That's not really. But I talked about storytelling, but. It's so awesome because now all my friends, I literally know 40 CEOs that are purposeful CEOs. And whether they're for-profit leaders or nonprofit leaders, they live their lives in such a way that everyone knows that they will do everything they can to build bridges all the way to everyone in their community.
So we started working together. And bit by bit, like you said, you had your first proof point. You got up on stage and you told a story that you had told many times before, but you sensed that space, that pause, that it's almost like a field in the audience when it sounds like to me, it's like a low hum when everyone's paused, everyone's in their depth of their experience, and you know that you are with them. There's actually some brain science to that, which I won't get into right now, but you're matching brains, basically. The flow of blood in your brain is matching precisely.
That's what it feels like.
That's exactly right. And so what happened was we started working more and more and developing more stories, because the foundation of this work has a lot to do with what you leave by the side of the road. Those stories, those insights, those lessons that are left back there because you don't know what to do with them. You don't know how they match to what you most deeply care about. Maybe you tried to tell them, but they didn't work, and people are kind of like looking at their watches, or they're overwhelmed, or they're crying and saying, are you okay? Are you okay? Which is not what you want. You want to move them into that powerful moment and through that moment into a transformation. And so we worked this many times. And in that time, you were speaking with these other purposeful leaders, and people are saying, you know, what is this? What's happening? And you called out to me and said, we need to get a group together because there's other people that are wanting to understand how this works.
Well, first I brought you into the United Way purpose class that we built, that Vivek Alandro and I were teaching. We brought your book into that group.
Right.
You know, that was like we were kind of seeding it, not knowing, but looking back. And then, then you started the pod, and all of the people showed up. Each group, it's like everyone that joined. I think there's like 2 people I didn't know that have joined, and now we're good friends. You know, they're that friendliest face in the crowd.
But they didn't know each other, and that was what's so rich. So we created this group that we were all working on our stories together. And at first, I thought, well, so I'll be helping each of these individuals, and that was true. But what happened that was surprising to me, really surprising, was not just how people worked and helped each other, because I had seen that before in workshops and different things that I had done. What surprised me was the cultivation of trust and mutual support that came from those groups that now I'm not even, I live in Southern Oregon where you used to live, and I'm out of town, and you're all meeting for breakfast, and you're going to each other's events, and now you're sitting on each other's boards, and you're supporting each other through phone calls and conversations. And I keep coming back and saying, well, what's the real essence of that? Like, why is that? And part of it is about cultivating authenticity, right? Being real. Because when you're being real with a group of leaders, you can't be real with your team sometimes if you don't know how to tell a story. You might be breaking down, or you have be at risk of breaking down, or overstepping, or you need to have a cultivation of practice in order to develop that authenticity, so you understand how it works and how it feels and how it carries with other transformative leaders. And so as a result of that, the cultivation of trust, the mutual support, the interconnectivity, and true support in how we communicate with others, that resonates out in the world. And so as a result of that, now I get to come back here and find, tonight we're going to go and go to the Team Kids event with Julie Hudash. Her story is right here because she told the story at our Legend event last year. And we're going to connect with, see all kinds of other leaders. We'll see Eric Goodman, who's in this article. And so it's that cultivation of connection.
And we'll see like Ed Hart. We'll probably see Dawn. We'll probably see Deborah. We'll probably see David. David will definitely be there. Other people in the picture.
And we'll see. So what's been a gift for me is supporting these groups that then become a bigger network, a bigger group that helps each other to truly deliver on that purpose that felt so solitary in many ways before. That not because you weren't working or people weren't working with organizations furthering their objectives, but because there's something deeper, something that's left by the side of the road, something like that square nail that you described that's stuck in that copper pipe, that when you pull it out, when you resolve something, when you bring an insight forward into your current world, you see the world differently and you see each other differently, and you're able to collaborate on a greater story. And that's what I'm most excited about in Orange County, is that there are bigger stories that are being transformed, stories of how to address homelessness, stories of how to support economic justice, stories of how to help the kids. These are bigger stories now that people are collaborating together. These leaders are collaborating in, that is so wonderful to see. Here's what I'm witnessing when I see all of these leaders working together, getting up on stage, when I see Dawn and Eric and Ed and David and Julie and Nicole and Deborah and all of these incredible leaders that are owning their purpose on the big stage and on the small stage. That's the difference to me, is that it's not I will get up and tell the great story. That's not what this is about, actually. It's as much about story listening as it is about storytelling. In fact, it's maybe 80% story listening. And it's the story listening of your own life speaking through you, Charles. It's those little bits, those things that still kind of stick in your side. Well, why was that moment important? It was so long ago. Like, I don't know. I tried that. I don't know where it fits. These moments that inform our constellation of how we're guided. This is not storytelling. It is more story listening. And the big point of it is story living. We are living into a greater story. And if we can recognize others around us that are acting on their stories too, which is what I have witnessed, what this article is really about, is how do we live into a bigger story, not an idea, but a transformation where we can look upon the horizon and see how it's going to work and rally not just our employees or our funders, but everyone around us. Not just our friends or our family, but our greater team, to orient into a story we are living. And that's what I'm seeing. That's what you're doing. That's what all of these incredible leaders that I've been fortunate enough to work with are doing. Now, I want to say one thing here, which is that the word hope, I want to talk about hope for a second, because hope is a word that I've always struggled with, because it feels like, oh, golly, I just hope so. It just feels like something that doesn't have the power that it should for a word that is so prominent. So sometimes I look under these words, and I looked under the word hope. I looked at the etymology, the meaning, the origin of the word hope. And I didn't find anything in the origin of the word hope, but sometimes I look in other languages, and I looked in the kanji for hope, which is the Chinese characters that formulate the Japanese language. So the kanji for hope is two different symbols. The first symbol is a wish, right? A wish is pretty close to hope. But there's the second symbol is very important. The second symbol is set far away. So a wish set far away, it means that hope is better used as a noun than a verb. It's not I hope, but it is hope. And that hope sets the point on the horizon that is part of your story. It's what the transformation looks like. And that's real. It's real because then you can see with your allies that know also how to story listen, that know also the power of telling and retelling a transformational story. You can live a story together. And that's my greatest dream for Orange County, is that more collaboration, more connection, more trust, the kind of trust that has emerged naturally through these communities, these teams of collaborators that are these transformational leaders, changing how the world works. And that, I think, you're leading the way in Orange County.
Well, we have fun. You know, when you're talking about all those leaders and what's happening, and there was something that really struck me. And since I've become a storyteller and a story listener, I've become one who does not need to know. I always had to know. I'm the CEO. I have to know the right answer. And now I've become really good at not knowing. And I think great leaders have to learn that tool. And I think storytelling is a gateway to that tool.
I am so glad you brought that up. You know, I work with a framework, which is a distillation of many ancient masters, including Joseph Campbell, including ancient improvisational storytelling, what Pixar creates, and also some things from Kurt Vonnegut, other different teachers of this realm of story. And at the core of it is what Joseph Campbell called the innermost cave, the place of not knowing. It is the place of not knowing that many leaders are afraid to go. Because if you're not the one who knows, then who are you? And I think that going into that not knowing, in the story, it's actually, if you look at the story as the seasons, if it starts in the summer and then goes to fall and then goes to winter and then pops into spring, all of the story lives in between winter, that not knowing place, the place where we're down deep in the darkness, and that possibility, that cultivation of spring, the possibility that we're going to make it through again. That practice of transformation, that is all of the potency of the story. And so being in the not knowing, being in the place where you do not have to know, even if it's just modeling that for 30 seconds, it's actually the essence of where all creativity comes from. And if you run through that and say, oh, well, let me just tell you about something that I learned, that's why storytelling gets a bad name. It's because people are like, oh, I don't need to hear all the things that you know. It is not about what you know. It is how you model.
Or how about the guy that we all love, they're in our families. They start telling a story, and by the way they tell the first few words, you can tell they've told it 1,000 times and they're pushing a tape recorder button. And it's not fair to everyone there. They don't even know they're torturing us. But it makes me want to tell a story, because I love to tell stories. You've taught me that. It's hard for the audience to keep up with everything we're going on. But I'm going to tell a story about not knowing, because this is this story I discovered that really helped me grasp not knowing. And it's a true story that happened 1,500 years ago on another continent, when a young man named Paiwan, I'm going to call him Panwan. I don't remember his name. Panwan was going on his pilgrimage. He was going to find himself, to discover who he was. And he was so excited. And as fate would have it, on the first day of his pilgrimage, a storm hit. And he was put in another direction. But in the direction he was going, he saw the palace where the most wise one of all, one who had received his enlightenment, lived. And as he walked toward that palace to pass it, carrying his stuff, the wise one was out there, and he saw him, and Panwan straightened himself, and I go, oh my God, he's right there. And as he started to walk by him, the wise one smiled at him, and he's smiling at me. And he asked, where are you going? And Panwan paused, and he goes, straightened himself up best he could. And he said, I'm on my pilgrimage. And the old master tilted his head and asked, what is pilgrimage? And Panwan's mind froze. You know how you get excited in the moment. He couldn't think, and he wanted to give some deep answer to impress this master, but he didn't know what to say. And so finally, he bowed his head, thinking he failed, saying, I don't know. At which time the old master smiled and said, not knowing is most intimate, meaning not knowing is closest to enlightenment. And when I really heard that story, it was presented to me by Sam Shepard, who was doing a guided meditation tape. I heard it profoundly, and I let go of knowing. In my home, I'm really good at this. I mean, at home, it might test me sometimes. At my work, I think you could ask all of my employees the difference of me today than 10 years ago. But letting go of not knowing, which I achieved through storytelling, might be one of my greatest assets of leadership. Who knew that not knowing was going to allow me to really hear and be heard?
Beautiful. Do you mean Sam Harris?
Sam Harris. Who did I say?
Sam Shepard. I like that idea.
Sam Shepard's the actor.
Not knowing is the most intimate, the closest to it's the closest to source. It's the closest to source because it's where all possibility lives. And so if we come into a story or an explanation where we're just the arrow, just trying to force through and tell people how it is, people shut off. But if we leverage the seasons of story, the possibility for transformation, the possibility for surprise, the place of not knowing, even just for a second, even just for a moment, as we poke our way through into that first sprout of spring, that's the transformation that not just affects people's hearts and minds, but it affects their memory. And so when they're a year out thinking, what am I going to do now? This story is whispering in their ear. And that's why stories inform culture and always have. And that's why our stories, the stories that we're cultivating, that we're bringing, that we're story listening into and story living into, those are the stories that have the great possibility to inform new potency in Orange County. And I'm so honored to come and spend time and be invited to come here and be a part of it. We've got this wonderful collection of storytellers that it's only tapping the tip top here in the Orange County Business Journal. But there's something that is emergent, and that thing is that, and a big part of it is because of you going out there and being bold and not just being willing to tell your story, but being willing to live your story. And that's the thing, is that, people could see you on stage, they could love you, they could not know what to make of you.
Boy, that guy's kind of arrogant.
He's so big, he's so excited. What's happening?
What's with all that hair? Is that real? Does he dye it?
But then they're going to see you again and again. They're going to see you up on a roof. They're going to see you dedicating yourself. They're going to see you connecting with other transformative story listeners and changing the way that things work here. And I have to tell you, I'm a Northern California guy. I live in a town that's a little bit like Berkeley, where I came from. And the Orange County is not known for this. Orange County is not known for progressive transformation on the ground of these issues that are so important in a time of so much disconnection and so much division. It's this purpose work and these stories and this trust that's built that is the antidote, politics notwithstanding. It is the antidote, not just to how we live in society, but the world that we're creating, the hope on the horizon.
Before we end, come in here and take our picture of Jay and I on the cover of this or on the back page of this magazine. I want a picture.